All right, get ready to dive deep because today we're tackling embedded systems software developer interview prep. And this field, it's just exploding with opportunity. I mean, RoleCatcher is projecting like 22% growth over the next decade. So yeah, a lot of doors are going to be opening up.
It really shows, how crucial embedded systems are getting to be. I mean, they're everywhere. They're like the hidden brains in all these devices, from like your smart appliances at home to the medical equipment that's, saving lives.
Exactly. And to help you navigate this whole world, this exciting career path, we've got a ton of resources from RoleCatcher. We've got their career guides, their interview guides, and even they're looking to some of their AI tools. And really, our goal today is to give you the insights and the strategies to not just answer the interview questions, but to really impress.
Yeah, it's about showing them that you're not just someone who can code, you're a problem solver. You really understand embedded systems and you can thrive in this field.
So let's jump right into the interview itself. Now, RoleCatcher highlights a bunch of these common questions that come up. And that very first one is usually about your experience. They'll ask something like, describe your experience with embedded systems development.
And this is where you get to really, tell your story. Don't just like list off projects. Think about like the challenges you faced and how you overcame them. Did you have to optimize code for limited memory on a microcontroller? Did you work on something with really tight real-time constraints? Those are the kind of stories that'll grab their attention.
Okay, so it's about storytelling and problem solving.
Yeah.
I imagine they also ask a lot of follow-up questions, right? To kind of dig a little deeper.
Absolutely. They might be like, what were some key lessons you learned from that? Or, how did that challenge change how you approach embedded systems? This is your chance to show that you can think about what you did learn from it and adapt.
That makes sense. All right, so we tackled the experience question. What's next?
So the next one, they really want to see if you get the unique challenges of the field. They'll probably ask you something like, what are the most common challenges you face when developing embedded systems?
So this is where you show them that you're not just someone who knows how to code, but you understand the bigger picture.
Exactly. So think about the constraints of embedded systems. Limited memory, real-time requirements, specific hardware limitations. You have to show them that you can think critically about these challenges and come up with solutions.
So you might mention like memory management techniques, real-time operating systems, optimizing code for specific hardware.
Yeah, and back it up with examples. You could say something like, in one project, I had to use low-power sleep mode to extend battery life. It meant carefully managing power consumption and optimizing code for efficiency.
Okay, that's great showing your skills in action. I bet interviewers also want to hear about the tools of the trade. What about questions related to microcontrollers?
Yeah, for sure. They'll often ask, have you ever worked with microcontrollers from different manufacturers? And if so, which ones? So this is where you can, show off a little bit of your hardware knowledge.
That's like the microcontroller roll call.
Hmm.
Do they want to hear about specific manufacturers, or is it more about showing your range of experience?
It's a little bit of both. Mentioning specifics shows you've actually gotten your hands dirty, but it's also a chance to talk about any interesting differences or challenges you ran into when you're switching between them.
So you could be like, I've worked with both ARM, Cortex-M, and AVR microcontrollers, and I found that, ARM's architecture offered more processing power, while AVR was amazing for those low-power applications.
Perfect. It shows you get the little details between those different microcontroller families, and that might lead to follow-up questions like, can you describe a time when you had to choose between these two, and what made you go one way or the other?
Oh, it's like a chess game. You're already anticipating their next move. Speaking of technical skills, what about low-level programming languages? Those seem pretty key for embedded systems.
Totally. Expect a question like, what is your experience with low-level programming languages? This is your time to shine if you're comfortable with C, C++, or even assembly.
You're showing them you're not afraid to get down to the nitty-gritty with the hardware.
Exactly. Emphasize your understanding of memory management pointers, how your code interacts with the hardware. You could even talk about a time you had to debug a really tricky low-level issue.
Great way to show off your problem-solving skills in the real world. Now, I'm sure interviewers also really care about safety and reliability, especially in things like medical devices or automotive. How do those topics usually come up?
Usually they'll ask something like, how do you ensure the reliability and safety of embedded systems? This is a big one, and your answer has to reflect that.
Yeah, it's not just about code that works. It's about code that works perfectly and safely, even when things get unpredictable.
Exactly. You want to highlight, your grasp of testing methodologies, debugging techniques, and industry standards.
What kind of industry standards should you mention?
It depends on the specific industry. But some common ones are IEC 61508 for functional safety, ISO 26262 for automotive, and DO 178C for aerospace.
So it sounds like they're looking for someone who understands how important it is to build reliable and safe systems.
For sure. And don't be afraid to share specific examples of how you've made sure things were safe in your past projects. Maybe you designed a fail-safe mechanism or used really thorough testing protocols.
That's a great point. It's about showing them your commitment to quality and safety, not just talking about it.
Exactly. Before we get to more interview questions, let's take a quick look at some career insights from RoleCatcher's Guide. It's important to see the bigger picture of your career path.
Okay, I'm listening.
Well, for one, they lay out a clear path from junior to principal developer, with each stage having specific responsibilities, and they even have example profiles. This is so helpful. You can use it to tailor your answers and show where you fit in now and where you want to go.
That's awesome. So it's not just about doing well in the interview, but understanding your potential growth path within the company and the field itself.
Exactly. Now let's jump back to those interview questions. We've covered 5 so far, and we've got a lot more to unpack. Welcome back to our deep dive on prepping for embedded systems software developer interviews.
We were just talking about, career progression and how RoleCatcher's Guide really maps out that journey from junior dev all the way to principal developer. It's even got example profiles, which is amazing for understanding where you fit in now and, maybe where you're headed in the future.
Yeah, it's like a roadmap for your career. And the cool thing is you can totally use that to your advantage in the interview. Like if you're going for a senior role, you can highlight those experiences that show leadership, mentoring, project management skills.
That's such a good strategy. All right, so back to those interview questions. What else does RoleCatcher's Guide tell us?
Okay, next up they get into real-time operating systems, or RTOS. So be ready for a question like, what is your experience with RTOS?
Ah, yes, RTOS. Those are super important for applications where timing is absolutely critical.
You got it. Think about systems that need to react really fast, like in milliseconds. Industrial control systems or automotive applications, they rely on RTOS to handle tasks with super strict timing requirements. So in your answer, you want to talk about which RTOS you've worked with and how you use them.
So you might say something like, I've used FreeTOS to develop a real-time control system for a drone. And I had to really carefully manage task priorities and interrupt handling to make sure the system responded correctly and met those deadlines.
That's a great example. It shows, RTOS and that you can use it in a real project.
Awesome, RTOS check. What's the next challenge in this interview obstacle course?
All right, well, security is a huge deal these days, especially with, the Internet of Things growing so fast. So get ready for a question like, how do you ensure the security of embedded systems?
Yeah, it's not just about making things work anymore. It's about making them work securely, especially if they're connected to the internet.
Exactly. You need to show them you understand those security threats and vulnerabilities in embedded systems. Think about things like buffer overflows, injection attacks, denial of service attacks.
Okay, so how do you impress them with your security skills?
Talk about the security measures you've used before in your projects, like encryption secure boot processes, authentication, stuff like that. You could even mention industry standards, like NIST or ISO 27001, just to show you're up to date with the best practices.
Okay, security measures and standards, got it. Anything else?
All right, communication protocols are super key in embedded systems. You might get asked something like, how do you handle communication protocols in embedded systems?
Right, it's like the language that different parts of the system use to talk to each other, or even to talk to systems outside.
Yeah, exactly. Be ready to discuss your experience with protocols like UART, SPI, I2C, CAN, even Ethernet. Explain how you've implemented them and any challenges you had.
For example, I could say I've used SPI communication between a microcontroller and a sensor to get data in real time.
Yeah.
And I had to configure the clock speed data format, chip select lines, all that stuff to make sure the data transfer was reliable.
Perfect example. Remember those specifics? Always make your answers better.
All right, communication protocols, check. What's next on our interview prep list?
Debugging. It's part of life when you're developing embedded systems. So expect a question like, how do you approach debugging and testing?
Debugging, it's like the detective work of software development. That's where your problem solving really comes in.
For sure. So describe your process for finding and fixing issues. From little logic errors to those really complex timing issues. Talk about the tools you use like debuggers, oscilloscopes, logic analyzers.
Show them you're a methodical and resourceful debugger.
Yep. And be specific. You could say, I use breakpoints and step through debugging to see how the code's running. And for the really tricky timing stuff, I use a logic analyzer to grab those signals and decode them.
Those are great examples. Okay, we've covered debugging. What else does RoleCatcher's guide say?
They talk a lot about the importance of working together. Embedded systems development is almost never a solo thing. Get ready for a question like, how do you work with hardware engineers when you're developing embedded systems?
Teamwork and communication. Bridging that gap between software and hardware.
Exactly. Highlight your experience working with hardware folks, how you communicate clearly, and how you handle any conflicts that pop up.
I could see something like, in a previous project, I worked really closely with a hardware engineer to figure out the interface between the microcontroller and a custom sensor.
Hmm.
We had regular meetings to talk about the specs, review schematics, and troubleshoot anything that came up.
That's a great example. It shows you get that embedded systems development is a team sport.
Okay, collaboration check. We've covered a ton here. Any last bits of advice from RoleCatcher's guide before we move on to their AI tools?
RoleCatcher really stresses how important it is to keep learning in this field. Things change so fast. They recommend staying current by reading industry publications, joining online communities, and even doing personal projects.
So it's not just what you already know, but showing them that you're dedicated to keeping your skills sharp and learning new tech.
Exactly. In the interview, you could mention an article you read recently, a conference you went to, a personal project you're working on, anything that shows you're passionate about learning.
That's a great way to show them you're not just looking for a job, but you want to grow and contribute to the field.
For sure. All right, let's switch gears now and see how RoleCatcher's AI tools can take your interview prep to the next level.
All right, we're back and ready to unleash the power of AI for your embedded system software developer interview prep. RoleCatcher's AI tools sound pretty amazing.
They really are. Think of them as your secret weapon for crafting like the perfect resume and giving those interview answers that really hit the mark.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me how these AI tools work.
So it starts with their AI resume analysis. You just upload your resume and the job description you're going for. And their AI engine gets to work. It analyzes both and picks out the keywords and skills that the employer really wants.
So it's like having an AI recruiter telling you exactly what the hiring manager is looking for.
Exactly. And it does more than just find keywords. It gives you suggestions on how to tweak your resume so it matches those keywords better and really makes your skills and experience stand out. It even highlights any gaps in your experience that you might want to address.
That's incredible. It takes all the guesswork out of writing a resume. But it sounds like RoleCatcher's AI goes even further than just resumes.
You're right. Their AI also gives you personalized feedback on your interview answers. Like, imagine you're practicing for a common question, like, describe your experience with real-time operating systems. You type your answer into RoleCatcher, and the AI looks it over and tells you specifically how you did on the content, the clarity, even if you use the right keywords.
Wow. It's like having a virtual interview coach.
Exactly. It's a personalized feedback loop that helped you get better and more confident. It can even analyze your tone and how fast you're talking and give you tips on how to sound more confident and clear.
This is amazing. It's like leveling up your interview game with the power of AI. But let's bring it back to our listeners who are getting ready for their interviews. What's the key takeaway here?
The key takeaway is preparation is key. And with the right tools and resources, you can walk into that interview feeling confident, prepared, and ready to show them your best.
We've covered a lot of ground today. From breaking down those common interview questions and crafting great answers, to looking at career paths and using the power of AI. As we wrap up, what's the one piece of advice you'd give our listeners as they start their embedded systems journey?
As you prepare, remember why you're passionate about embedded systems. Let that enthusiasm shine through in your answers and how you talk to people, because at the end of the day, it's that passion that drives innovation and pushes the limits of what's possible.
That's a great reminder. Technical skills are important, of course, but that genuine passion is what really sets you apart. Well, folks, that's a wrap for our deep dive into the world of embedded systems software developer interviews. We hope you found this episode helpful, insightful, and maybe even a little inspiring as you embark on this exciting career. Good luck, and remember, you've got this